despite these numbers that I was going to
Well, it depends on, I guess it depends on.
It's coming.
But yeah.
It's a different.
All stand. Coronial court is now resumed. Please be seated. Yes, Dr.
Thank you, Your Honour. Your Honour, I call Vanessa Watts, also located in New Zealand, who appears to be online. Miss Watts, can you hear us?
Yes, yep, I can. Oh, I look at the camera, do I? Not the TV. Either one is good. Oh.
Hi, Miss Watts. I'm the coroner. Thanks for making yourself available today.
No worries, no problem.
And do you promise to tell the truth to the court?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much.
Miss Watts, you can see and hear us, is that right?
I don't know about Stephen, but blind, but I can definitely hear you.
Well, if that changes at any time, let us know. Can you tell the court, please, your full name?
Vanessa Jane Watts.
And where are you physically located to give evidence today?
I'm at the Novotel Hotel in Hamilton, New Zealand.
Where do you normally reside?
I live in Kintor community in the Pintupi homelands in the Northern Territory.
And what's your role there?
I'm a remote area nurse.
How long have you held the position as remote area nurse in Kintor?
Since February.
Since February this year, 2022, is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
You're giving evidence today because for around 4 years, from 2017, you worked as a remote area nurse in Yundamu, is that right?
That's correct.
And that was your role in November 2019 when Kumanjayi passed away?
Yes.
You've prepared or participated in 2 statements for this inquest. The first was done on the 22nd of June 2020, and that was an interview with police, is that right?
Yes.
And then you've done a recent statement the 5th of October 2022.
Yes.
And you've got those documents in front of you, is that right?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Nurse, can I start by asking you about some of your background and experience in nursing? You note in your recent statement you've got over 24 years experience as a nurse, first in New Zealand and then in Australia?
Yeah, that's correct.
When did you first work as a nurse in Australia?
I started in 2010
And
in Kalgoorlie.
In Kalgoorlie?
Yeah.
Correct. You then worked as a nurse in a number of different communities in Western Australia, is that right?
Yes, I then went on to Jigalong, which was a remote Aboriginal controlled community. And I worked there for 2 years, and then I came over to Northern Territory government.
When you started working in Western Australia in remote communities, did you participate in any cross-cultural training or cultural competency training?
Yes, I did, yeah.
What did that involve?
Just with Kalgoorlie, it was more of an online module, and with Jigalong, it was more of a cultural introduction to the community with local people.
So it was more of an informal introduction rather than a formalised training, is that right?
Yes.
So you started in the Northern Territory for NT Health in 2014, correct?
Yes.
And you note at paragraph 13 that you completed cultural awareness training when you began to work for NT Health. What did that involve?
Yes. Well, I did one through the Northern Territory government, the NT Health government, which was an online module, but I also did the cultural training through the clinic, which is compulsory.
Through which clinic?
The clinic I started at Fink Clinic.
How can you compare those two cultural inductions that you got, one in Western Australia and one in the Northern Territory? Were they of similar quality and of an in-depth nature, or different?
Yeah, they're quite in depth. They were both in depth. They're quite in depth, and you have to learn quite a lot. I also did one through Krana as well, an Indigenous one through Krana.
What did that involve?
Just modules, basically online modules.
You referred to Krana. What is that?
It's a remote area nurse organisation that provides learning and support.
You'd be familiar through that training then that the cultural expectations in each community are different. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And language is different, obviously.
Yes, absolutely.
And the elders and emerging leaders are different for each community group.
Yes.
So do you agree that it's important whenever you start in a new community to participate in an induction?
Yes.
And did you do that when you started in Yuendamu in January 2017?
Yes, I did, yeah. It's part of the orientation.
So you say that your induction was led by local Aboriginal staff members at the clinic, Jabson Williams and Nola Fisher, is that right?
Yes.
And what did it involve?
A little bit around the language, about the skin, the different skin names, different, a lot about where sacred land, where you can and can't go, just little cultural differences between, people and, induction going around the community and actually seeing different places and things like that.
You would have come to know through your work in the Northern Territory and in Western Australia the importance of funerals and sorry business to community members. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Did you ever participate in any funeral or sorry business?
I have never been to. I've never participated as a guest in a sorry camp, but I have participated in the fact that I've been out to sorry camps to help people that are sick and couldn't come to clinic and things like that. I haven't been at a.
I'm sorry, we missed. You broke up just with that last comment.
Oh, I haven't been a part of a sorry camp as such, as an invited guest, but I have been to sorry camps and been involved in helping sick people at sorry camps that couldn't come to the clinic.
Ms. Watts, from time to time when the clinic manager, Luana Simmons, was away, you acted in that role, is that right?
Yes.
Did you come then to attend a number of different meetings with elders and emerging leaders in the community?
Yes, I did.
Who were the elders and leaders that you mostly engaged with?
I've forgotten a lot of their names, to be honest, but I remember Ned Hargraves and Valerie Wilson. Sorry, I've had a mind blank. I can't remember any other names.
Did you have relationships with any Aboriginal people outside of work hours?
Well, I lived in the community with my little boy, so I wasn't just involved in clinic. I had my little boy went to daycare and to preschool and to school there, so I was involved in sort of after school things, like if they were doing things through the school or through the daycare, or and my little boy used to have friends over every day, and we'd have kids over for dinner and things like that. So yes, yeah.
So you were there in community from January 2017 through to November 2020, is that right?
Yes.
How old was your son when you first moved to community?
He was about 20 months, I think.
And you note in your statement that raising him in the community gave you another way of interacting outside of the clinic hours, correct?
Yes, it did, yeah.
And did you then develop any friendships with any of the parents of or family members of the kids who your son played with?
Yes, I did.
Warlpiri was the predominant language in Yuendamu. You note in your statement that you learnt some Warlpiri words, correct?
Yes.
Was there any formal way offered to you of learning Warlpiri?
No.
And
There is a lady in Yuendamu actually that's teaches Walpri, so I did a couple of those classes. They're on every Tuesday, so anyone can go and learn. And a lot of nurses and teachers and people that live and work in the community go and take advantage of those lessons.
did you find it to be useful to participate in Warlpiri lessons?
Yeah, I did. Plus, my little boy, he used to sing all the songs and spoke a lot of words, and so I learnt stuff off him as well and his friends. And I always asked people at the clinic what names were and for different things. So, yeah, you pick up a lot of different words. I didn't speak the language as such, but I knew a lot of different words and names for things, and, yeah.
As a nurse based at the clinic, you're providing one-on-one clinical care on a daily basis to community members, is that right?
Yes.
Who was acting as an interpreter or translator for you during that process?
We didn't have interpreters and such, unless someone particularly wanted an interpreter, then we could get perhaps Mary or Nola, who worked at the clinic, to come in.
Did you ever utilise the services of the Aboriginal Interpreter Service?
Not unofficially. Officially, I did. I think I did once with a man that was. I was helping with a court proceeding, and I sat in with him while he had an interpreter. But no, I didn't ring them up daily or anything like that.
Do you in your nursing have any particular specialty?
Well, not a speciality as such, but I have particular interests.
What are your particular interests?
Well, I like sexual health and women's health is my interests.
Did that mean that you saw a particular cohort of the community?
Yes.
So would you tend to see more women than men in your role?
Yes.
Were there any?
We also had male nurses at the clinic, and mostly the men preferred to see men. That's just a cultural thing for them. And we would always ask, whenever anyone came in, we would always ask if they preferred to see a woman or a man, and most men would prefer to see a man.
When you were seeing women, or for the most part, or any staff members, or any community members, did you ever perceive that there were difficulties in communication?
No.
Did most of the community members who you assisted speak some English?
Yes. They're amazing. They can speak often 3 or 4 different languages plus English. They don't. I mean that their English isn't perfect. But then they certainly can speak good English. And sometimes you might have a little bit of a language barrier, but it just takes time, and you just have to be patient and just find out what the story is and just work your way through it. But no, they've got very, very good, English, and they speak amazing. They speak lots of different languages.
We've heard evidence about a GP who was stationed in Yuendamu for the period of time you were there. Do you know whether or not that GP speaks Warlpiri?
I don't know which GP you're talking about.
Dr. Rosser?
Oh, Dr. Rosser. I think she spoke some limited Warlpiri, yes.
During the period of time you were working in Yuendamu, did you provide any counselling service to members of the community?
Not formally, but I mean, obviously, when you've got people in your consult and you become involved in what's going on sometimes personally and with their health. You do sort of learn a lot about people, and they do confide in you about things. Yes.
Do you have any formal training in providing any counselling service?
No.
You understand what I mean by trauma-informed care or trauma counselling?
Yes.
At any time when you were in Yuendamu, are you aware of anyone providing trauma counselling to members of the community?
Yes, we had a couple of people that came in and did that sort of counselling.
Do you recall their names?
Yes, we had Kerry Ann, who used to come in, and I'm pretty sure she came for a weekly at least, and we had another lady, and I can't remember her name, sorry.
By Kerry Ann, you're referring to Kerry Ann Chilvers, is that right?
Yes, yes.
During the period that Kerry Ann came in, do you recall who she was employed by?
No.
I wanted just to ask you about some other services available in the community. You're familiar with Purple House?
Yes.
Were there members of Purple House based permanently in community?
Yes.
How many members of Purple House were permanent?
I know there was always 2 and possibly 3.
Did you work with the Purple House staff?
No, not as such, but we had a lot of communication with them over dialysis patients. You know, maybe a dialysis patient that had a wound, and we would go over and maybe dress that wound while they were having dialysis or something like that. Or they would ring us if they were concerned about one of their patients to ask for a review or bring them over to the clinic. So we worked in that aspect together, but we didn't work together. It was a separate place.
And did you understand them to be permanent? I withdraw that. Did you understand the Purple House staff to be clinically trained nurses?
Yes.
Registered nurses?
Yes.
And was there a doctor who would visit for Purple House on occasion?
I know the renal team used to come out regularly, yes.
In addition to the nursing staff based at Purple House, were you aware of any nursing staff based at the aged care facility?
No.
Were there any other services in the community offering medical care through nurses or doctors?
Not that I know of.
Do you agree that in terms of the care that was provided by nursing and staff and medical staff to the community in Yuendamu over your 4 years, there were a significant number of people in the community who required chronic health care?
Yes.
And there would be acute crises from time to time, for example, wounds that were caused or accidents?
Yes.
On an average week, did you regard your workload as heavy in Yuendamu?
As what, sorry?
As a heavy workload in Yuendamu?
Yes, it could be very busy. It was always busy, but it could be very busy.
And for periods of time when nursing staff were on call, would you in general always get called out to do something?
Yes.
What sort of things would you be required to do on call?
Sick babies, maybe, hot babies, people with asthma, people with infected wounds, people who are unwell with chronic diseases, people who'd had accidents.
Do you agree that the role that nurses played when they were on call in the community then would on occasion be life-saving?
Yes.
You note in your statement that generally speaking you very much enjoyed your time living and working in Yuendumu.
Yes, I loved it.
And you have noted that your son had an extraordinary, you describe it as an amazing childhood, being able to grow up in that community during those formative years, correct?
Yes, yes.
And you were welcomed by the community?
Yes.
And he was welcomed in terms of being at the school and being able to play with other kids?
Absolutely, yep.
Did your positive experiences in Yuendumu change, putting aside the general challenges of living remotely? Did that change, or did you always feel that you had a positive experience in Yuendumu overall?
Overall, it was positive, yes.
I just want to ask you about the break-ins generally in community. All communities across Australia, of course, experience crime from time to time, but from 2017 through to the beginning of 2019, was there anything that particularly concerned you in relation to break-in of houses?
There seems to be a lot of talk focused around that weekend when we actually did leave, but there was a lot of break-ins, not just with the clinic, but community-wide leading up to that. So it had been going on for quite a few months, so it wasn't just that weekend.
But for quite a few months in 2019, is that right?
Yes.
So there seemed to be something that changed in terms of the break-ins and the number of them in 2019. Is that right?
Yeah, they seem to increase.
Okay. So I want to go back then to your understanding of what was going on in the community around that time. Are you familiar with WIDAC?
Yes.
Up until 2019, were you aware that WIDAC provided activities for children at night and young people?
Yes, I am. Yep.
What sort of activities did you become aware of?
Well, they used to have basketball down at the basketball courts every night, and they did a lot of sort of field trips and activities and camping and stuff with them. So, yeah.
And did that seem to you to be some positive community interaction for the young people?
Yes, it was great.
Did you ever attend any of those activities?
Yep. Yes, I did.
What type of activities would you attend?
Maybe if they were having a barbecue or basketball down at the basketball courts, I'd take my little boy down. There was a few concerts and things that I think maybe that was poor media, but they were sort of involved in things like that. So, yeah, I did. I used to attend quite a lot of things like that.
Did any of that change in 2019?
No.
Your perception was that there were an increased number of break-ins in 2019 in the months leading up to November. Were there any other services that were there any services that were reduced or affected around that time that you were aware of?
The shops got broken into quite regularly, but there was 2 shops, and so they were regularly closed after they'd been vandalised. The school, because of course my little boy went there, the school would be closed, and that was closed a couple of times after it had been broken into and vandalised. The daycare, the pool. I know Waidat got broken into and vandalised, and I think they closed for the day. It was just generally things like that.
There must have been then a lot of discussion in the community around that time as to why those break-ins were happening. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Your house was not directly affected in the lead up to November, or was it?
Well, I mean, I have said in my statement, you know, it wouldn't be abnormal for me to have kids in my yard every night.
Sure, but that's not a break-in, is it?
No, it's not a break-in, but it's still, they're on your property without, you know, it's not. It's, yeah.
Did that concern you?
Oh, well, you know, I kind of feel that you normalise a lot of stuff and you just accept it, but it didn't concern me as such, no. I felt safe in my house.
In terms of the break-ins that had occurred in the lead up to November at a number of different places, was there any view expressed to you that it was likely to be children or young people involved?
I think the general consensus was that it was young people, like young teenagers.
Did you participate in any community meetings about what the causes of those break-ins were?
I know I went to at least 2 community meetings where it was that was the main reason why we were meeting, was to get everyone together to try and resolve or try and figure out what we could do about it.
Okay, so let me deal with those then. When do you remember the first of those meetings being held?
I don't remember the date, sorry, but I know that I know I went to at least 2 in 2019, but I don't know the date, sorry.
Was the first one in the first half of 2019 or the second half?
Oh, I'd say it was the first half.
And why would you say it was the first half?
Because I know that about 3 months later we had another one, so I'm just guessing really.
When was the last meeting you had?
I don't know.
Did you take any notes at either of those meetings?
No.
Dealing with the first one then, how was that organised?
I think it was generally, I think the first one was after one of the shops got broken into and vandalised, and I think it was actually the shop people that requested it. And then it was with the police. They organised it.
Where was the meeting held?
We used to have a little park called the Peace Park, just in the middle of the community, so it was held here.
Which elders or emerging leaders attended that meeting, if any?
I remember Derek, the policeman, he was always there. I remember Valerie Wilson was always there, and Ned, and I can't remember the other man's name, but I can see his face. Sorry, I can't remember the name.
What do you recall about I withdraw that. Up until that point in time of that first meeting, had any nurses' accommodation been broken into that you're aware of?
Yes, yep.
Whose?
The child health nurse had her house broken into.
What was her name?
Robin Carmichael.
Okay. That was in 2018, is that right?
Yeah, I guess it was.
Okay. Was that the topic of discussion at that meeting?
No.
So it was just general break-ins, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
It's fair to say, isn't it, that at that point in time it was extremely unusual for there to be any break-in of nurses' houses?
Yeah, it wasn't so much nurses, it was more teachers, the school, the daycare, the general buildings around town, yeah, the shops.
Was
things
there
like
any
that.
was there any discussion about what could be done to address, firstly, the causes of why young people were breaking in?
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion, and the elders were just as upset as everybody else was. They were just as upset as everybody else. They didn't like what was going on or understand what was going on, and they were at a loss as what to do as well. And I think everybody wanted to come up with a solution or do what they could to help, but I don't think. I think everybody felt the same.
So that meeting was an opportunity for people to express their frustration, correct?
Well, not so much. It wasn't really like expressing frustration. I think it was really people just wanting to see if there was anything that they could do collectively as a community to sort of help, or see what they could do to help.
And was there a plan? Was there a plan put in place after that meeting as to what could be done to help?
I can't recall. Sorry.
Can I ask you to reflect on this? If there was a perception at that time that it was children or young people breaking into houses, was there any discussion about what could be done to speak with those children and young people, to hear about it from their perspective?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of them, the elders particularly talked about, that it was up to the parents of these young people to sort of, try and sort of resolve it at home.
Which parents, which young people, were they discussed?
Well, the parents, there was no particular people discussed, but in general it was like, well, what's happening with the parents of these young people? Why are these young people out at 2 and 3 in the morning breaking into places? Why aren't they at home? That sort of thing.
Following on from that, was there any discussion about anybody speaking to the parents of those young people to see how they could be supported?
I know that WIDAC were working with the parents and young people. I know that they had a lot to do with it, but I don't know details. Sorry.
We can ask WIDAC staff who were present at the time about this when they come to give evidence. But you agree there's any number of reasons why children and young people might be breaking into houses?
Mm-hmm.
And trying to address that problem involves understanding the causes of it. Do you agree?
Yes.
And that could be because, couldn't it? Kids are hungry. Kids are being kicked out of home. There's violence at home. Kids are bored.
All of the above.
All of the above. So was there any effort to try and understand why that was happening?
Well, everybody wanted to understand and everybody wanted to, everybody wanted to help. But I mean, I don't know how that anything got resolved from those meetings.
Was there any action plan that you're aware of that came out of those meetings?
No, but I think we just, I think it was just sort of agreed that we would meet up again and have another meeting, really. I don't think anything got resolved.
And did another meeting take place after that as a follow-on?
Yes, there was. I remember going to another meeting. I don't know when it was, but it was just along the lines of the same thing, of that the break-ins were continuing and nothing was changing.
You say the police were present at that meeting too?
Yes.
Was there a discussion at either of the meetings as to how anybody in the community could make their premises more secure?
Well, most of the places were pretty secure. They had, there was most of the places were pretty secure. There was big efforts going into things that got broken into.
Do you recall any increase in services or activities for kids after either of those meetings that might address the cause of the offending?
Yes, I think WIDAC actually increased their services in the evening for the younger kids.
When did that happen?
I don't know the date, sorry.
Do you know what services were increased?
I think they were perhaps, I'm not sure if they always had food there or they started providing food or a meal or something like that at the basketball courts in the evening, and maybe it's been on a bit later.
All right, we can talk to WIDAC about that. Are you familiar with night patrol?
Yes.
Did night patrol operate in Yuendamu in the 4 years you were there?
Yes, they did.
Did night patrol or anybody from night patrol attend either of these two meetings?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did.
Do you know who that was?
No, I don't recall the name, sorry.
Was there any discussion at either of those two meetings of increasing night patrol staff?
I don't know. I can't remember.
I appreciate you're not a police officer. I'm just asking you to reflect on this as a community member. Do you agree that one consideration might be to pay night patrol so that members of the community are actively engaged in addressing that?
To pay them?
Yes. I would draw
I
that
thought
line.
they did. I thought they did get paid.
Do you recall having any discussions with night patrol members yourself about protection of clinic staff?
Oh, they were great. They used to drive around all night and they would keep an eye on the clinic houses. They were good.
I think you say in your statement that you felt safe in your home at night time. Is that right?
Yes.
And that you include in that all the way up until November 2019?
Yes.
So regardless of the increase or the perception of increased number of break-ins in 2019, until November of that year, it didn't make you feel unsafe in your home?
Oh, that's a hard one. I mean, you know, I had kids in my yard most nights. I quite often would come home from work and there'd be knives wedged in my door or scratch marks from someone trying to get in my door. So, and I guess I just, a lot of it was just sort of normal, but it's not really normal once you go away and think about it.
With those incidents that you talk about, did they increase in November, coming home and finding scrape marks on your door?
I think, yes, it was steadily increasing right up until we left.
Would you report incidents like that to police?
Yes. Oh, actually, not every day. I didn't report every day.
Do you mean you didn't report every day that it happened, or that it happened
Yes.
every? At paragraph 42 of your statement, you say you were involved in an incident when you were treating a patient in the emergency department in the clinic who we had collected in the ambulance, and people were throwing rocks in the clinic. The spotlight on the ambulance was smashed while it was parked in the ambulance bay.
Mm-hmm.
When did that incident occur?
I think that was November. I think that was in the November 2019.
Obviously prior to Kumanjayi passing away, is that right?
Yes.
And when you say you were involved in that incident, how were you involved?
I was in the clinic with the patient and the other nurse.
Do you know, I'm not asking for names, but were the offenders there ever identified?
They were throwing rocks at the clinic, and they were throwing rocks at the ambulance, and they smashed both spotlights on the ambulance. And we heard the smash. Oh no, I think I went out to see what was going on when the first rocks were being thrown, and they ran away. So I didn't. They were younger kids though, you know, sort of young teens. And then
Was that in the? Sorry, nurse, I spoke over the top of you. Please continue.
no, I don't think they were.
Did that incident occur in the day or the night?
It was early evening, but it was still light.
Did you perceive that they were young people who were bored and looking for some action, or did you think there was another reason why they were throwing rocks at the clinic?
I perceived that they were young and bored.
Did that incident get reported to police?
Yes, it did.
You note at paragraph 46 of your statement that in the 2 weeks or so prior to the withdrawal of the clinic staff on the 9th of November, the frequency of break-ins increased again. Do you mean break-ins of people's houses generally, or services in the community?
Everywhere.
How did you come to be aware of that?
Well, generally, you know, everybody knew what was going on in the community, so generally everybody would know what had happened, and it just word got around that somewhere had been broken in. Generally, we'd have a morning meeting, and generally there'd be one nurse that had you know, people trying to break into their house the night before. There'd always be somebody reporting that something had happened the night before.
So this is in the lead up to November 2019, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was obviously a significant escalation for you, wasn't it, to what you had experienced previously in Yuendamu in the first 3 years?
Yes.
Did you report that up your chain of hierarchical command?
Yes, we did, yeah.
So you reported to Luana Simmons?
Yes, and we also had Riskmans, which was a system that you reported it through, which went to management in town.
And so that was an electronic system, is that right?
Yeah.
And who was responsible in Yuendamu for making the notifications on Riskmans?
Each individual.
All right. Did you personally enter some details into that?
Yes.
So each time you would be concerned about activity at your home, you would enter something in there, is that right?
Not each time, but maybe sometimes when I thought it was, you know, pretty bad, or, you know, like if they smashed the window in one of the vehicles or something, generally.
Did you ever receive any response? I'm sorry, nurse, you went quiet there. Could you say that again?
I only generally reported when something got broken that needed to be fixed.
Apart from fixing something that was broken, was there any request that you were making of NT Health to assist with what appeared to be an escalation?
Well, I presume that's why we did the risk man, is that we wanted there to be a record of it, I think.
But did you think that you should be getting any extra support from NT Health at that time?
I don't know what they could have done.
Was there any discussion of alarms being put on the nursing accommodation?
Not that I'm aware of.
Do you think that might have been of use? Given that most of the break-ins, your perception was that they were young people or children, having an alarm system that went off when they broke in might deter them?
Yeah, it might.
Do you recall any discussion of that at any of the meetings?
No, I can't recall, sorry.
From paragraph 49 of your statement, you talk about some of the particular incidents that were occurring in the lead up to November. You note that one staff member, Chrissy, who lived with her husband Stu, had their house broken into. Stu was the mechanic at Waidak and he had a disability requiring use of a wheelchair, and a number of things were stolen from that house, including the new wheelchair and their car. Do you recall when that incident occurred?
No, I don't recall when it was, but I remember it.
Chrissy and her husband left the community after that, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel about that?
I was really sad that Chrissy left. She was a really great asset to the clinic.
Did you speak to any of the elders or community members about that having occurred?
I think most of the community knew. I mean, Chrissy was very well known and she'd been there a long time, so most of the community knew.
But did you?
I would speak to people, like I might be seeing a patient who would say, "Oh, it's terrible, Chrissy got broken into," and I'd say, "Yeah, it's awful, isn't it?" You know, something like that. But no, I didn't go have any official conversations about it.
Nurse Watts, did you feel pretty powerless in terms of doing anything to understand what was happening?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
You had relationships that you've been developing outside of the clinic with members of the community, particularly because of your son being at the school. Did you speak to any Walpuri friends and community members about what could be done?
Well, yes, we used to talk about it, and but it was generally like, "Oh, it's terrible, isn't it? And what are we going to do about it?" And, "Oh, you know, the kids are being naughty," and things like that. But I think everybody felt pretty powerless about it. I think even the locals, they didn't like what was going on either, you know. It was only it was a very small group of people in the community that I think was doing it, and, you know, and the rest of the community didn't, you know, it wasn't like it was acceptable.
So your perception was that Walpuri people also felt powerless in terms of doing anything to stop the break-ins from this small number in the community?
Yes.
You recall that a number of the cars belonging to staff had been smashed. Another RAN, Julie, had gone out to respond to a call one night and the windows of the clinic car were smashed. And you say this at paragraph 52, "I felt that there was a small group of people in the community who were targeting the clinic staff."
Yeah, I think by the time it got to that stage where we were getting our cars smashed and broken into in the driveways, it was feeling like we were being targeted.
Did you perceive that there was any reason for that?
No, I didn't know why.
In terms of the community houses, I'll withdraw that. Did you speak to any members of the community as to whether or not clinic staff were being targeted?
No, not in those words, just that, you know, the clinic houses were getting broken into and you know, and I mean, most of the community members, they knew what was going on, and they would, you know, you'd talk to them about it, and they were unhappy about it too, you know, and it would just be a conversation like, "Oh, it's no good," you know.
Did you say the sheer number of incidents suggested that it was directed towards clinic staff? Do you accept that might just be your perception, that it wasn't in fact directed towards clinic staff?
Yes, yeah, it could just be my perception. I mean, and it wasn't just clinic; it was all services. So, but there just seemed to be, you know, lots of incidents happening with the clinic houses.
Did you feel that there was anyone that you could ask for further assistance of?
What sort of assistance?
Well, I'm asking you because you lived in the community and you worked for NT Health. Was there anybody else that you felt that you could go to ask for assistance for?
Well, the police were supportive, and we had, they did a lot of work to the nursing houses. They took out all the sliding doors and put windows in with grills and things like that.
When you were working in Yuendamu for those 4 years and you're based in Yuendamu, was there, as part of your package, weekends in Alice Springs that were paid for?
Yes. Every 3 months you got a day, one day that you could tack onto a weekend to have a long weekend.
Did you have any accommodation paid for in Alice Springs during that time?
Yes.
And so that was a way of giving you some respite out of the community, is that right?
Yes. I didn't generally go to Alice Springs for weekends. I tended to stay in the community because I had my little boy there, and it was easier to stay in the community than to go away.
Do you, when you started to feel that nursing staff were being targeted or clinic staff were being targeted, was there a way you could have asked for some respite out of the community?
Yes, I think if we'd asked management in town, they would have provided respite. I know when Robin when she got broken into, they offered for her to go into town for the week, but she didn't want to go.
If I could tell you that incident involving Robin, our police records I anticipate will suggest that was 2018. Does that refresh your memory?
That it was 2018?
Yes, rather than 2019. Does that surprise you?
No.
So at that time, when that incident happened with Robin, she was offered some respite, and it was up to her whether she took that or not, correct?
Yes.
So that was an option that was open to you when you experienced a break-in, is that right?
Yes.
On the 6th of November, you dropped Luana home from work, and when you arrived at her house, the front door was open and you came to realise that her house had been broken into, correct?
Yes.
And you set that out in your statement, and we've just heard from Luana giving evidence about it. $250 in cash was taken and an iPhone, and police came to investigate. You say, paragraph 58, Luana was upset by what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
What gave you I'm not suggesting that that's unusual to be upset that your house is broken into, but what do you mean by her being upset?
Well, just like anybody would be upset if you come home to your house and it's been broken into and ransacked. She was upset.
Was she angry?
I don't think she was angry. Might have been a bit annoyed, but she wasn't angry.
Did you stay for the police Did you stay while the police attended that event?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Police attended fairly promptly to investigate. Is that right?
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
On the 7th of November, do you remember anything unusual happening?
Is that the next day?
Yes.
Oh, well, the next day was when they tried to get into my house, and then I woke up and turned the lights on. And
Or just go back a step, because in your statement, just feel free to have a look at it from paragraph 53. This Wednesday, the 6th of November, was when Luana had the break-in.
Wednesday, sorry, yeah. No, Wednesday was Luana, and then it was a Friday night, yeah.
Right.
So no, I don't, yeah, sorry.
Nothing unusual on Thursday the 7th?
Not that I can remember. Not for me, maybe.
And Friday the 8th, on that evening, you woke up to the sound of banging at your door, correct?
Yes.
You got out of bed, turned the lights on inside your house, heard people outside run away, and then went back to bed?
Mm-hmm.
What time was that, roughly?
I think it might have been about midnight.
So not long after that, you woken up again to really loud banging next door at Luana's.
Yes, yeah.
The force that was being used was audible to you in your house?
The whole house was shaking.
And you note that because of the earlier break-in, the house had been reinforced. So it sounded like there was a lot of force being used to break in.
Yes.
You were aware they weren't home, Luana and her husband weren't home that evening because she'd be returned to Alice Springs to get the car repaired. You rang police and requested they attend. They
Yes.
then did attend.
Yes.
How were you feeling at that time when you called police?
I think I was a little bit scared, just because of the real force that was being used.
Nothing like that had ever happened to you before in your 4 years at Nyundamu, had it?
Not that sort of force where I later found that they were using shovels and pickaxes and stuff, and that window had been the window that they previously broke into, so it had been reinforced, so it was that's why they needed to use a lot of force, but no.
Prior to the 8th of November 2019, had you ever woken up at night to the sound of someone trying to break in?
Yes.
How often had that, or when was the last time that had happened?
I don't know when it was. It happened regularly.
Do you say it happened regularly to you in your 4 years that someone would try to break in at night and wake you up?
Oh, you just hear the door. We had screen doors, so you'd hear the door, and but no, I never had like that night with that force. I never had that experience before.
So I just want to understand that prior to that evening of the 8th of November, you had been woken up with somebody trying the door handle that was locked, correct?
Yes.
But you'd never had anybody trying to smash open a window or break in any way other than trying the door handle, is that right?
I used to have a garage that was attached to my house because it was a duplex, and they'd quite often be in the garage. The kids would be in the garage, but just seeing if there was anything in there. But so you'd hear them jumping the garage door because it was like a barn door. So you'd hear them in the garage or trying the door, but never had I had someone forcibly trying to, use real force to get my door open.
And at any time prior to, or when you described trying the door handle or kids in the garage, was it always your perception that they were kids?
Well, not little kids, but young teenagers.
I think you've said elsewhere, prior to November 2019, am I right that you did not have fears for your own safety when you at night in your own home? Is that right?
Well, I always felt safe in my house if my house was locked, because I felt that it would take quite a bit of effort to get into my house. And in that time, I obviously lived in a duplex, so I could ring my neighbour or I could ring the police, and I had time for people to come before people would be able to get in, because we had quite good security.
How often do you think you called police to come out at night during your time in Nyundamu?
I don't know, to be honest.
On each occasion, when if you were concerned about someone trying to break into your house, did you contact police?
Not every time, no.
On this occasion, on the 8th of November, I would draw that you would contact them if you had concerns about your safety, wouldn't you?
Yes.
On this occasion, when you heard somebody breaking into Luana's house, it was about Julie Frost, is that right?
Yes.
She came with another police officer?
Yes.
And this is what you say at paragraph 69. You spoke to Julie about the property crime that had been occurring lately and your feeling that the clinic staff were being targeted. And you say, I was upset because this was the first time that people had forcibly tried to get into my accommodation while I had been at home. Is that right?
Well, forcibly, I mean by actually making a full-on force with a shovel or a pickaxe, you know. Yes.
Julie was sympathetic and she told you that the police were getting additional resources out from Alice Springs the following day to help with the problem.
Yes.
Did she tell you what those additional resources were?
No.
Did you ask what those additional resources were?
No, I just presumed it was more police.
Given that she said that, did that provide you with some comfort that the issue might be addressed?
I suppose it did in a way, but I didn't think it was going to solve the problem.
It was obvious to you, though, wasn't it, that she was sympathetic?
Yes, yes.
And it appeared that she was taking the problem seriously, given that she was getting some additional resourcing.
Yes.
At this stage, it was about 2 a.m, and you note that yourself and Janine, Perua and Tilly had come outside. You discussed the fact that property crime seemed to be increasing. Tilly seemed to be frightened. She was young and on her own in accommodation. And the 4 of you then went back to Janine's house and continued the discussion of property crime there and had a cup of tea.
Yeah, because we'd all been woken up by it because the police came, and that was the night Janine's car got smashed in her driveway, my car got smashed in my driveway, and Luana's house got broken into. It was because the 4 houses were all next to each other.
Was there a discussion between you at that time about escalating your concerns to NT Health?
No, I don't think so. I can't remember.
Did you consider at all during that time that you might leave the community or shut the clinic for a period?
No.
Had you ever been in any community when the clinic had been shut for a period? That is because of some incident in the community?
No.
And had you heard of that happening at any time in the Northern Territory?
No.
Were you aware of any protocol that needed to be followed if there was going to be consideration to temporarily closing a clinic because of an incident?
No, I didn't know that if there was a protocol.
Did you consider that it was even a possibility at that time?
I wasn't really thinking like that night, no.
On the morning of the 9th of November, you were rostered for on-call shift at Yuendamu with Cassandra Holland, correct?
Yes.
And you talked to her about what had happened the night before, and Cassie agreed to be the first on call and you the second so you could try and get some sleep.
Well, that's not how I remember it. I thought that I was first on call and she was second, but she told me she was first on call. So she said she would do it. So, and I was happy with that. So, well, no, I wasn't.
Well,
I rang Luana in town just to clarify with it because Cassie told me that she had spoken to Luana about it. And I rang Luana in town about it, and she said that, no, she wasn't aware that Cassandra was first. But then it was agreed between Cassandra and I that she would be first and I would be second. So that was the way it was.
Was there some benefit of being first? Well, I would draw that. By first on call, does that mean that you'd be the first person to be called out?
Yeah, you answer the phone.
Okay. And what does second on call do?
Well, they come in if you need further assistance.
So by what you say in your statement at paragraph 76 is that you told Cassie you had slept very little the night before, and Cassie told me that she would be first on call and that I would be second.
Yes.
I read that as meaning that she agreed to give you some further respite. Is that not right?
Well, that's not how I remember it, but I think that's probably how she perceived it to be. So.
All right. How did you perceive it to be?
Well, she thought she was first, but she wasn't, and I was actually first.
Okay.
Is there some difference in pay or? Sorry, it's just the coroner asking. I'm just trying to understand.
Can you hear Her Honour's question? Was there some
Sorry?
difference in pay, or was there a benefit to being first on call?
Well, I guess if you get called out, you get paid to be called out, yes.
Oh, I see. So being on call, you only get additional money if you are paid to actually if you get a phone call and go out. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So on that occasion, had you wanted to be first on call?
No, I didn't like being on call.
Right. Okay. I'll move on. During that phone conversation, Cassandra told you that she would report the incidents you told her about to management so that they were aware of staff safety. Later that morning, she called you and said there would be a team meeting. You all met at Janine's house. Who's Janine?
Janine was a midwife, was a midwife at Yendamu.
Okay. So for the mid-morning meeting, which we've heard something about from Luana, who was by telephone, there was yourself, the midwife, Cassandra, who was another nurse, Tilly, who was a nurse, Julie. Who's the Julie there?
Julie Cook, the nurse.
Okay. And John, who was a nurse?
Yes.
Lisa, can you remind us?
She was a nurse.
Okay. Yourself and Helen Gill and Luana by telephone. What do you remember about the discussion?
I think just really that the break-ins were, had been the break-ins were escalating and just that we were all sort of starting to get a bit worried and yeah.
Was there a discussion during that mid-morning meeting about the clinic potentially closing temporarily?
Yes, I think I can't remember with total clarity, but I think there was a suggestion that maybe they would evacuate the nurses for the weekend.
Who made that suggestion?
Helen Gill.
Paragraph 81, you say this: we discussed with Helen that there'd been a number of incidents of break-ins and property damage over the preceding 2 weeks, that it felt targeted towards us and that it seemed to be escalating. We all had an opportunity to speak during the discussion. Each of the staff there said that they did not feel safe in Yuendamu that weekend. When you say each of the staff there, do you mean by that Janine, Cassandra, Tilly, Julie, John, Lisa and yourself each said that you were not safe to stay in Yuendamu?
Yes, because when Helen suggested that we may evacuate, we all had to actually make a decision as a group and we had to all be, all had to agree on how we felt, and everybody felt the same, that it wasn't safe.
Was there a discussion there during that time of the risk to the community if all of the nurses from the clinic were withdrawn for a period of time?
We did talk about it, but then Yuendamu was to cover for the on-call over the weekend.
We just heard evidence from Luana Simmons that during the mid-morning call, the discussion initially was that 2 nursing staff would stay in Yuendamu to provide for the community. That was what was discussed during the mid-morning meeting. And then it changed later in the day. Do you recall that?
No, I don't recall that. I thought that it was, we all, if we were going, we all had to go.
Given what you told us at the beginning of your evidence, that nurse on call can be involved in life-saving procedures for a range of reasons. Was there any discussion about the risk to members of the community that someone might die because the nursing staff were not on call?
No. But Yulimu, we were assured that Yulimu was covering for Yindamu.
We've heard evidence that Yulimu is at least 45 minutes away by road on a good day. Do you agree with that?
You can get there by a back road that's quicker, but the long road is 45 minutes.
How long do you think how quickly do you think you can get there from Yulimu to Yundamu by the back road?
Oh, 25 minutes, maybe.
Was it your expectation at that time that nursing staff would use the back road from Yulimu to get to Yundamu?
Yes.
So your thought was that staff would be able to travel there in 25 minutes, correct?
Yes.
And you'd allow, wouldn't you, for the loading up of the ambulance, or allowing for that time? How long do you think is the shortest possible time for staff to get from Yulimu to Yundamu?
Oh, well, you know, I'd say 40 minutes to you know, to get completely organised.
At night, do you think that that's a realistic estimate of how
No,
long it would
I think you'd probably, I think for safety you would have to take the Tarsiel Road at night time, unless the road was particularly good, but at night, yeah, you'd use the Tarsiel Road.
Okay, and that takes 45 minutes, correct?
Yes.
And so allowing for the loading of the ambulance, do you agree that emergency service from Yulimu would be approximately an hour away?
Well, the loading, you don't really load the ambulance. The ambulance is already pretty equipped, so you just take a bag.
All right.
And if you were coming here, if you were coming to Yindamu, you would have the keys to the clinic, so you wouldn't need to be bringing over all sorts of gear.
All right. Well, we'll hear directly from the staff who did end up coming from Yulimu about how long it took them. But what were you thinking at the time would be the most likely period of time that it took from Yulimu to Yundamu?
40 minutes.
Yulimu is a community that has a population of fluctuating between 300 to 500. Do you agree?
No.
What was your understanding of the population of Yulimu in 2019?
I think there's only about 80 to 120 people there at the most.
In November 2019, is that right?
Well, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's only a very small community with about 80 to 120 people, and it fluctuates, I guess. But we quite often covered, Yulimu would quite often have no staff, and we would cover Yulimu from Yindamu regularly.
Sure, but Yundamu was a population of about 900, correct?
Yeah, 800, 900.
So a clinic staff of 6 covering a small community that you believe to be 80 or 90 people was a different proposition to staff based at Yulimu covering a community of 800 or 900, wasn't it?
Well, you're only covering the on-call. You're not looking after the whole 900 people.
Was there a discussion during your mid-morning group of the fact that there were a number of people in Yundamu with chronic conditions, people with asthma, babies who had compromised health, and that any one of those members of the community might need emergency care during the on-call period?
Well, you don't know what's going to happen on any given day, but there's, you know, anything could happen at any time, yes.
Yes. Just listen to my question.
But you can't guarantee what's going to happen. Sometimes nothing can happen.
Nurse, was there a discussion during that mid-morning meeting?
Well, I think the general discussion was that Yulimu was covering, so we felt okay that there was, you know, they had some support.
Was there a discussion about the fact that some members of the community might be compromised because of the time that it would take for staff to get from Yullamu to Yundamu?
No.
Please understand that I'm going to put something to you. I'm not trying to minimise the distress of having your house broken into in the way that you, or attempted to break into in the way you describe, but you've given evidence that that occasion on the 8th of November was the first time that people had forcibly tried to get into your accommodation while you were at home.
Mm-hmm.
And you've given evidence of the risk to the Yundamu community if there were no nurses on call. Do you accept that there should have been more focus on risk assessment for the community in the course of this mid-morning discussion before nursing clinic staff were pulled out?
I think there should have been more focus on risk assessment for the clinic staff and the community. Yes.
And when do you think that risk assessment should have started?
Well, I was probably before we were evacuated.
You must have thought about this a lot over the 3 years since Kumanjayi passed away. Do you think now that it would have been better to leave some clinic staff in the community of Yundamu, providing them with additional support or protections, rather than withdraw the clinic staff?
Well, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Of course. We couldn't have prevented what had happened. The clinic couldn't have prevented what had happened, but of course, if you're going to say, would you have preferred to been there when that incident happened? Well, yes, of course, because, you want to help.
And Ms. Watts, in the course of this mid-morning discussion, Helen said, if you are not feeling safe, then we may be able to be withdrawn for the weekend. However, it would need to be approved by the General Manager, David Reeve. Did you understand that at the end of that mid-morning that a decision had been made by all of the clinic staff that you would like to leave the community?
Yes.
Helen said that you would also need to notify the police and the community that you were withdrawing and to provide additional medication for any old or vulnerable patients in the community, such as the Yundamu Old Persons Program. And you say because Cassie was on call, she was going to be responsible for that. Do you recall Cassie agreeing to be responsible for that?
Yes.
Was there any discussion firstly as to how and when she was to notify community members?
From what I remember, Cassie drove. She drove to and spoke to the police personally. She spoke to the Yulamu nurses and and discussed handover with them. And she drove around the community telling community members.
I just want to break that down. Firstly, during the mid-morning discussion, did you ever tell anybody that Julie Frost had said that additional police numbers were coming out to be of assistance?
I can't remember if I told anybody.
Did you give any consideration to the fact that in balancing the risk, nursing staff were likely to get more protection because police were coming out? More police were coming out?
Oh, sorry, can you say the question again?
Did you give consideration to the fact that when you're balancing the risk to nurses and the risk to the community, nurses were actually about to get more protection because additional police were coming out?
No, I don't think we did. I don't think it wasn't discussed, and yeah.
Do you think that there was actually a balancing of risk to nursing staff and risk to the community?
I, Yes.
Was that discussed?
Well, I think it was discussed in the fact that Ulamu was going to cover Yindamu, and we spoke to the police, we spoke to Old People's Program. I didn't personally, but they were advised,
Yeah, Nurse, at the moment, I anticipate submitting to Her Honour that the only discussion of risk to the community that morning, was that there was an agreement that Yulamu could cover Yundamu. Apart from that, was there any consideration of what the risk was to the people of Yundamu that you're aware of?
No, I don't think so.
Do you think in hindsight that there should have been more emphasis on a risk assessment for the community of Yundamu?
Yes.
In terms of any discussions with the community about the clinic closing, were you involved in that?
No, not directly, no.
So you didn't speak specifically to any members of the community about the clinic closing, is that right?
No. I think I might have spoken to Jefferson.
What did you say to Jemison?
Just that the nurses were being evacuating the community because of all the break-ins.
And what did Jemison say?
I think he was totally sympathetic about it.
What did he say?
I don't know. I think he probably said, "Oh, okay." Yeah.
Do you think that have you given any consideration to how the 3 Aboriginal staff members felt that they were left behind in the community while the cardia workers left?
Well, I'm pretty sure that Nola wasn't around at that time. I think she was away. I think I spoke to Jefferson, and I'm not sure if MJ, the other worker, knew or not, if anyone else spoke to her.
Did you ask Jamison how he felt that you were leaving?
Yeah, I think so. I think I just said, this. Well, no, I probably didn't ask him that exact question. How do you feel? But Jefferson was he was supportive of it. I believe he was supportive. He wasn't. He wasn't. I don't recall him being. Against it. I think he understood.
Do you reflect on it now, if you will, nurse? Do you agree that one option at that time would have been to try and request Aboriginal staff members to work with you to inform the community about the risk that nurses felt to themselves and see if there was an alternative to leaving?
Yeah, that would have been probably the better way to go, yes.
Do you agree that in making the decision for nursing staff to leave, there was no consultation with police as to an alternative?
Well, the police were aware that we were leaving, so there was consultation. But no, there was no consultation about an alternative.
All right. So police were told you were leaving, but they weren't consulted to ask how they felt or if there was an alternative. Do you agree?
As far as I know, they weren't consulted, but I wasn't there when they were advised that we were leaving.
Okay. You're an experienced nurse. You've reflected on this. I suggest to you that it would have been better, looking at this in hindsight, for nursing staff to have a discussion with police to say, we are thinking of closing the clinic. What are the risks to the community, and is there any alternative for us other than going?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I'm going to jump forward. You set out in your statement about when you found out that there had been a shooting in Yuendamu. You were completely shocked that something like that had ever taken place in Yuendamu, correct?
Yes.
You got back on the 12th of November when the Yuendamu staff returned to the community. When their decision was made to leave the community, was there any discussion as to how long the clinic would be shut for?
Well, I was under the impression that we were only going for the weekend.
What gave you that impression?
I don't know. I can't remember why I thought that, but I think that we were going to have a meeting in town with the management and try and work out some strategies. I didn't feel that it was a long-term thing, that we didn't have any plans of not coming back or anything. I thought that it was just for the weekend.
When you came back into the community, you came to understand that there was some anger directed towards the health staff because the clinic had closed during that time when Kumanjayi was in jeopardy. You could understand why community members were angry.
Oh, absolutely.
You can understand why some community members still feel hurt and let down by clinic staff.
Oh, yes.
And you appreciate, don't you, that there are important lessons to be learned from the way in which the staff were evacuated from community on this occasion?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Have you participated in any discussions with NT Health about what those lessons are?
No.
Thank you, Your Honour. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Your Honour. Ms Watts, my name is Mullins. I appear on behalf of the Brown, Walker, Lane and Robertson families. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
And Beck, could we have document number 9-15? That's the folder, and it's just the transcript ready to go in a few moments. Now, on 6 November 2019, you have told Counsel Assisting that you arrived home with Luana from the clinic. Do you remember that?
Arrived home, is that on the Wednesday?
On the 6th of November, when Luana's house had first been...
Oh, yes, I did. Yeah, I gave her a lift home from work.
And you went to her house with her to inspect the damage?
Yes.
And she was very distressed?
Yes, she was upset.
And you were quite distressed by it as well?
I was upset for Luana.
And
yes.
You contacted the police for her and they came out?
Yes.
And you spoke to the two officers?
Yes.
Do you remember whether it was Constable Hand and Constable Smith?
I can't remember who the officers were, sorry.
Do you remember whether there was any conversation at the time where you were told that the police knew who it was who was doing this?
No. I think... No, I think... No, I can't remember. I don't think so.
All right. Over the course of the next 2 or 3 days, until 9 November 2019, you had regular discussions with other members of the nursing community about the break-ins?
Yes.
And did you ever, during the course of those discussions, learn that police believed that they knew who it was who was doing these break-ins?
I think it was, they felt it was young people.
Did you ever discover that there might have been an older person involved, not a child?
No, it was more like sort of teenagers, I think. They were thinking it was teenagers, sort of 13 to 15.
And did you ever discover, or was there any discussion with your colleagues about the fact that the community were protecting these people to some extent?
No.
Now, on 9 November 2019, you had the meeting mid-morning with your colleagues. So that's the morning where you had the meeting with all the colleagues. You were on the telephone at Yuendamu.
Yes.
And were any of those issues discussed at that meeting? That is, that the police knew who it was?
No.
No recollection of that. All right. Now, you considered that the decision to withdraw was sending a message to the community.
I do think I said that in one of my statements, but that's not really what I meant.
Well, can we pull the statement up? So this is document 915, the police interview. It's, I think, PDF page 7.
I know I said it, but it's not how I want. It's not how I felt or what I really wanted to say. I feel like sending a message was a little bit not really what I meant to say.
Well, we can see there at the top of the page, this is page 7. Did you ever feel as though your personal safety was at risk? And then you mentioned 3 lines down, or 2 lines down, I feel fairly safe in those houses, because obviously we've got the mesh screen and it takes a hell of a lot of effort to get into them. So I feel safe in the fact that even if they're bashing the crap out of my window or trying to edge it open, I've got time to ring somebody. Then if we can scroll down toward the bottom of the page, and you make this comment without really a question being asked, but a little further down. That's it. Thank you. Oh, sorry, a little further.
Yeah,
right.
I know what you mean. I've read my statement, but that's not how I want. That's not really how I wanted it.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, yes, I said it, and it's there, so I can't take it back. But it's not how I wanted, and it's not how I felt that I wanted to send a message to the community. And I know it's been said, but that wasn't my sentiment.
So you say that when you say there, well, first of all, in the words that you said at the time, and this is in an interview on 22 June 2020, so it's 7 months, am I right? 22 June 2020, it's 7 months after the event. You say, so I do feel it was justified that we had to send a message, to say, look, we're here trying to help you, we're providing a service, and all you're just hammering us with trying to, break the cars, we were doing like a couple of windows a week on the ambulances and the cars, So I felt that it was the last straw for us to send a message that, you can't be doing this. Now, is the you're referring to the people who are actually doing it to you, or the community as a whole?
Oh, well, the people that were doing it, not the community. It's nothing to do with the community generally. It was only a small group of people. And, I said before, the community felt exactly the same way. They were upset about the fact that everything was getting broken into as well.
How was it that you think that doing this was going to send a message to the people who were the young teenagers who were doing the break-ins?
Well, like I said, I didn't mean that I wanted to send a message, so that wasn't my sentiment that I wanted a message sent.
You had a pretty poor view of the community, didn't you?
No.
Can we go through to page?
Not at all.
Can we go through to page 9, please? You're asked by Detective Duncan, when you say not done anything for him, just clarifying you meant the young man that was shot, yes. And then you say this, and if we can scroll just down a little further, maybe a further page. I don't think we could have saved him with his injuries. At the level of care we have here, we don't have the equipment. And it probably would have been just as bad for the nurses because of the fact if we didn't save him, we would have been blamed anyway. So we would have been sent out of the community regardless. And then you say in the next paragraph, and that's probably sort of harsh, but either way, I think if we didn't save him, we'd be crucified. And if we weren't here, we were crucified anyway. So you see that passage?
Yes, I do, yeah.
And what you're saying there, isn't it, that if you hadn't saved Kumanjayi Walker, even had you been there, you believe the community would have crucified you?
I believe that the Warlpiri people have a payback system, and so there is payback for things that go wrong, and that's their culture. So I believe we would have got payback, yes.
So you believe the nurses would have received payback had they been present and done everything possible to save the life of Kumanjayi Walker, and he died?
Yes, I believe that, yes.
And that was your understanding of cultural payback?
It's my understanding of that situation.
Thank you, Your Honour. Nothing further.
Any other questions for this witness?
Yes, Your Honour, I was wondering whether we could have the break.
Sure, we'll have the, ma'am, we'll just have a short afternoon break of about 15 minutes and then we'll come back and there'll be a few other questions for you. Thanks for being patient with us.
All stand. Coronial Court now stands temporarily adjourned.